Good morning, everybody. As you can hear, the clock is chiming 9:30. So even though the clock on the wall is slightly slow, it is indeed 9:30. So welcome to this meeting of Cabinet, which is taking place in the Wharton Room at the Winchester Guildhall. My name is Councillor Lucille Thompson, and I'm the Chair of Cabinet and Leader of the Council. Just a few housekeeping points before we begin. Can I advise that the open parts of the meeting are being audio recorded and live streamed from the Council's website. In addition, a video recording of the meeting is being made and will be publicly available shortly afterwards. Please can I remind all participants to speak clearly and remember to use the microphone. Please can everyone ensure that their mobile phones and other electronic devices are either on silent or switched off completely. In the unlikely event that it is necessary to evacuate the building, the fire alarm will sound. Please follow any instruction given to you by staff or fire marshals, and all the fire exits are clearly marked by the green exit signs. Please proceed quickly and calmly to the assembly point, which of course is in Abbey Gardens, and do not use the lift. So welcome to everybody. And let's go on with the agenda. Item number 1, of course, is apologies for absence, and we just have one.
Apologies from Councillor Todd, Chair. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is membership of cabinet bodies, and we've got a number of cabinet bodies that need to be amended. First of all, from the Conservative group, they would like to make a number of changes to the Central Winchester Open Forum and also the Sports and Leisure Park Open Forum. On the Central Winchester Forum, they'd like to replace Councillor Lumbey with Councillor Godfrey. And on the Sports and Leisure Park Open Forum, again, replace Councillor Lumbey with Councillor Kern. Okay. Then we have membership of cabinet or cabinet appointments to outside bodies, and we've got the Winchester Charity School Educational Foundation. This is an appointment until May 2025, but of course it will be confirmed in May, and we have two vacancies for trustees, and I have 3 names on the list. The first names are Councillor Ferguson and Councillor Atchwell, and I also have a nomination for Councillor Reid. So can I have an indication of hands, anyone in support of Councillor Reid? No? Okay. But thank you, Councillor Reid, for putting your name forward. Therefore, can I have an agreement that Councillor Ferguson and Councillor Atchwell will take up the trustee positions? Agreed. 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 Thank you very much. And of course, Councillor Atchwell, given that she's mayor at the moment, she will take up her position when she retires from the mayoralty. Okay, item number 3 is disclosure of interests. Don't really have any, as we haven't got councillors here. Request for councillors to speak. As usual, if it suits you, I will call you as and when we introduce the item. Thank you very much. Minutes of previous meeting held on the 25th of January, pages 5 to 10 of the agenda pack. Cabinet, are we agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much.
Sorry, you just skipped over public participation, probably because we haven't got any.
Yeah, I'm just. No,
oh, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
On my list.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry.
Right. Okay. Apologies. Yes, public participation. It's number 6 on the.
My mistake.
Okay. We have no members of the public wishing to address us today, and as And as I'm informed, no one from TACT is going to be attending either because they came along to scrutiny. So, and obviously the comments were made at that time. Okay, thank you very much. Item number 7 now, leader and cabinet member announcements. I've just got one information really to pass on. Myself, along with the Mayor, had much pleasure in attending the unveiling of the statue of Licoricia last week, I think it was now. And obviously, I know members of the public were greatly disappointed that His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales wasn't able to attend due to a positive COVID test, and of course we wish him well. I just wanted to inform everybody that it is his wish to return to Winchester, and in fact dates are being looked at the moment. So watch this space because he has given a firm commitment to come and visit Winchester, which I think is great news. Councillor Lerner.
Thank you, Leader. I'm pleased to say that today we have the public launch of the Central Winchester Regeneration opportunity with the publication of our brochure and press advertising. Conversations have already taken place with a number of potential partners and initial interest is encouraging. We plan to hold an open forum to update the public on the 16th of March prior to the start of the formal procurement process on the 17th. I'm also pleased to say separately that we have appointed Studio Multi as architects to work on the King's Walk improvements. Initial meetings have already been held and they will be meeting tenants next week. We already have a number of new tenants in King's Walk, and the Southdown Social has started its programme of events. So we are seeing a really good start to the vibrant creative quarter we're looking to create in this area.
Thank you very much. Any further announcements? I'm not aware of any from other cabinet members. Okay, right, well, moving on. We now come to the key decisions. Item number 8, the Housing Revenue Account Budget 22-23, pages 11 to 30 in the agenda pack. Councillor Manley.
Thank you, Leader. The budget in front of us today is based upon a 30-year business plan that's both viable and sustainable over that period of time. It ensures that funds are available to maintain Decent Homes Plus and to deliver the challenging target of 1,000 new homes over the next 10 years. Our principal focus is, as always, however, not simply on bricks and mortar, but our tenants, both current and future. Right now, we're seeing not only the effects of COVID on our tenants' wellbeing, but a cost of living crisis that will impact heavily on many of our tenants in the coming year. The national formula for raising affordable and social rents is CPI plus 1% for the 5-year period from 2020 to 2025. The assumption is that rents are uplifted annually based on the inflation applying in September of the preceding year, which last year was 3.1%. Following consultation with tenants and members, rather than the full 4.1% increase, we are proposing a CPI-only increase of 3.1%. Which in the context of inflation, which is now running at 5.5%, is certainly very reasonable. This is affordable at the current time, but there is a health warning to reducing rents any further in an environment where rents are capped by a government which is driven by other considerations than tenant welfare. The 2012 Welfare Reform Act imposed 4 years of real 1% cuts on the housing revenue account, impacting the services we have been able to offer, and a similar recurrence would affect the sustainability of the HRA and threaten the building programme. Putting our rents into context, after the increase we will have an average social rent of £122 a week for a 3-bedroomed house and average affordable rent of £199 per week. The local housing allowance for Winchester, which represents the 30th centile of private rent, so the cheapest third of housing available in the private sector, sits at £253 per week. So we are offering a considerably cheaper form of accommodation than can be found in the private sector. Rent is not the only charge which impacts our residents. Our policy on service charges is to recover the actual costs associated with some tenants' homes, particularly flats. With gas and electricity prices expected to rise by 92% and 52% respectively, and other costs also increasing fast. To protect residents from having very large increases, we propose a capping mechanism to service charges so that no one faces an increase of more than £5 a week. To more directly support tenants in difficulty, in last year's budget, the Council agreed to invest £500,000 in offering additional tenant welfare support. We have recruited and are spending this funding on additional mental health support, tenancy sustainment and personalised support, offering whatever will most help individual tenants in difficulty. This support will carry forward over the next 2 years. In addition, it is proposed that the HRA invest an additional £300,000 in improving and strengthening the capacity and capability of the HRA to address the Housing White Paper, the Charter for Social Housing Residents, focused upon improving the capacity of the teams to support the New Homes programme, the Decent Homes team and neighbourhood management. During lockdown, many social housing tenants have struggled without green spaces to enjoy. Others have dealt with loneliness, isolation and antisocial behaviour. The proposed 2 additional neighbourhood services officers will increase opportunities to invest in community development and tenant engagement, supporting our role as a landlord in keeping neighbourhoods clean and safe to live in. The proposed additional property surveyor will ensure the council continues to provide good quality, decent homes and neighbourhoods. And the additional post to support new homes delivery will focus on managing the range of alternative tenures now being delivered through the programme, working closely with both the new homes and leasehold teams. It's also proposed to invest an additional £500,000 in revenue repairs on an improved void specification and meeting emerging pressure on decent homes revenue spend. Our void specification is very out of date and it is time to review and update it. We are having difficulty in particular in letting older general need 2-bedroom flats, and while a variety of factors contribute to this, the state of the property when prospective tenants look at them is playing a significant part in that. This report was considered by the Scrutiny Committee on the 15th of February this week, and a number of questions were responded to. While members were happy with the HRA budget per se, concerns were raised about the importance of homelessness prevention and that it did not specifically feature in this or the general fund budget, which we're considering later today. We have confirmed that the detailed spending proposals to support homelessness prevention, which do not form part of the HRA, will be considered by the Business and Housing Policy Committee on the 1st of March this year. So I'd just like to finish by thanking TACT for their support over this and the housing team for the very hard work everyone has put into bringing forward this budget today. Thank you, Chairman.
And thank you very much, Councillor Lerney. Can I call on Councillor Horrell, who wishes to speak on this item, please?
Chair, good morning, and thank you for allowing me to speak to Cabinet. May I too thank the housing team for their efforts and bringing this very comprehensive budget forward. Housing is a key element of the Council's work across the district, and we should be duly proud of what we do. We had a very good opportunity to ask questions about this paper and discuss the HRA budget in detail on Tuesday at scrutiny. I know I asked many of them. We welcome the decision to only increase rents by 3.1%, as recommended by TACT and the Scrutiny Committee, and also to cap service charges. It is clear there must be a tenant and member discussion as soon as possible about the new approach to increasing the void turnaround, which has slipped over the last year, and also the void specification. As Councillor Nerney said, there was a discussion about homelessness. The focus on the homeless and our support plans are still to be discussed, and I welcome the portfolio holders' commitment to confirm the budget plans at the next Business and Housing Policy Committee, and certainly before PERDA. I wholeheartedly support the continued house building programme, and am reassured by the commitment at scrutiny that new home staff recruitment is progressing at pace. Without a focus on this area, we know build programmes slip. And I also thank TACT for their continued support for this programme too. The Housing White Paper, the Charter for Social Housing Residents, will be an important piece of work for us in the next year, and I welcome the budget allocated to ensure we can deliver the new requirements. It is good to see the HRA budget continuing to be in good shape and continuing to meet decent home standards. Chair, I hope Cabinet today and Council next week can rally behind the HRA budget and show the Council's continued commitment to social and affordable housing in the district. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Horrell, and thank you for your support of both the budget and all the items in it, particularly the cap to service charges and the slightly lower rent that we're going to be charging this year. Cabinet, have you any questions? I think we've all been through this paper several times now, so any questions that were eager to be asked, I think, have been asked. Okay. Councillor Nerney, I don't know whether you'd like to say any summing up words?
No, I'd just like to thank everybody for their support, particularly Councillor Horrell. I think we have a welcome meeting of minds in terms of the importance of housing to the district and the important contribution we can make. She did mention the void turnaround, and that has been an issue for a variety of factors, including COVID and material shortages. But this is something that we do need to look at in terms of the void standards we're looking at. I think it's very important that, particularly in the current environment, that we make sure that we give ourselves the time to, for example, put new energy efficiency measures into homes, taking those opportunities while homes are empty to carry out what can be very invasive procedures, but which will both support our net carbon zero ambitions and help tenants live in a home that's cheap to run. But we do need to give additional clarity about what those standards are going to be and what those expectations are. It's not just allowing the void period to slip, which obviously costs the HRA money.
Okay. Thank you very much, Councillor Nerney. Yes, just a few comments from me as a former housing portfolio holder. The HRA is in remarkably good condition, even in spite of all the difficulties over the last couple of years. And of course, our housing department is almost the jewel in the crown, actually, and the envy of lots of other councils up and down the country in terms of what we do for our tenants, and also, of course, our very proactive new build programme. I'm delighted that we are going to sort of look at the standards that we re-let voids in. and obviously keeping a close watch on the number of days that those voids remain voids is really important too. So I'm really in support of this paper, and it's great to hear that we have cross-party support on this issue. So moving to the recommendations, they are on page 12 of the agenda pack. There are many of them, and of course this all goes forward to council, and as indeed the other papers before us today do as well. So Cabinet, can we approve the recommendations please on page 12?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you very much. We now come to item number 9. Thank you, Julie. Item number 9, the General Fund Budget, CAB 3335. Councillor Cutler, would you like to introduce the report, please?
Thank you, Leader. Last year, we had set a very challenging budget. We made the assumption that income would still be reduced by 20%, and we had to take some very hard decisions to reduce overall costs within the budget. Despite a very strong recovery and very high demand in city centre car parks more recently, we were clearly right to do so. The forecast is now that the income reduction will be 14%. So we're finishing the year stronger than we expected, and this allows us to reduce the call on our reserves as a result, and also to make a contribution to the community grants reserve of 200,000 to reduce the impact of planned reductions over the next 3 years. We still face very significant risks this year. For example, we're pursuing a number of complex planning enforcement cases for which we approved £200,000 back in October to support the process, but the cost will be higher, and we're currently assessing the risk and the costs there. However, and also our contractors are seeking greater assistance to mitigate the impact of the pandemic, and of course inflation will be another issue there. We're taking a firm but fair line. We're expecting to increases in costs in the coming months. With the 14% reduction in income rather than 20, we've amended our forecasts over the next couple of years. From in last year's budget, we forecast 10% reduction in income for this year, and 5 for the following year. We have reduced this to 7 and 3.5%, but again, those costs are very difficult to assess, or that income are very difficult to assess. We reviewed, and Cabinet reviewed our budget options back in October and made and approved those proposals. We were then anticipating a 3-year settlement from the government, which would include the proposed reset of business rates. Somewhat unsurprisingly, that didn't come forward, and we have a 1-year settlement. The announcement came fairly late in the day, and has made planning more difficult, but that settlement was positive compared with what we've been expecting, with a further year of new homes bonus and a delay in the reset of business rates. That actually left us with a net one-off benefit of £1.3 million. However, we are pretty sure that the 3-year process will be implemented next year, and business rates reset, which will be a significant reduction in income for us. The report today confirms the proposals in the October options paper, but the main changes are the proposals we can make around the £1.3 million brought forward through the spending settlement. These recommendations are set out on table 13.5 and include 440,000 to climate emergency initiatives, including 250,000 into low carbon transport, 150,000 for prepare for a food waste trial, and 40,000 to improve facilities to encourage walking and cycling, in particular improving facilities for cycle storage and parking, safe parking of bicycles. We also propose to put up £185,000 into addressing fly tipping and street scene throughout the market towns. This is to and the city. This is to respond to requests from the market towns that this would be one of the key ways that we can help them with pandemic recovery. That improving the environment in those towns and villages is really important. We have a requirement to spend up to £1 million on historic monuments and assets, and we propose to bring forward £450,000 of that expenditure from this sum for much needed work on important monuments. We feel it's important to continue the council tax hardship scheme that we implemented last year, that is a top-up to the very generous council tax reduction scheme that we have, given the costs that people will be facing this year, and so we intend to allocate £100,000 for that. And included in there also is £25,000 for work on the City of Sanctuary and diversity work that needs doing within the council, training and preparing to work on the City of Sanctuary proposal. It's important that we also highlight the forecast deficits in future years. Our medium-term financial strategy includes a proposal to address the forecast deficit in 23-24 through the transitional reserve, but also to complete a detailed and thorough strategic budget review to identify how we address longer-term deficits. This will include reviewing all our operating costs, an ongoing asset challenge to make sure we're using our assets effectively, and an assessment of opportunities to generate additional income. We will start work on this immediately the budget is approved. I'm not proposing that this one-off money underpin basic budget, and with inflation currently running 5.4%, the increases in fees and charges and in council tax are unavoidable. The proposed 2.7% increase in council tax is below that being proposed by many neighbouring authorities, and the 3% increase in fees agreed in December is again well below current inflation. Despite the longer-term challenges, I'm pleased to be able to bring forward a budget that maintains all core services, increases capacity for project delivery and for some core teams which have seen increased demands. It also proposes some really important investment plans that will benefit residents across our district. This report was considered by Scrutiny Committee 2 evenings ago on the 15th. There were a significant number of questions, and I'd like to bring the following matters to Cabinet attention. The committee highlighted 3 areas in Appendix B, which was around the additional spending, and those plans should read the same as the recommendations in Table 13.6 of the report, i.e. historic asset monuments, 450,000, promoting cycling and walking, £40,000, and the fly tipping street scene element at 185,000. All other figures in the total spend in this section remains the same, and the recommendations are not affected. The Chair of Scrutiny requested that members be informed of the proposal for promoting the availability of the hardship fund recommended in the report, and officers have agreed to circulate the information to members as soon as it's confirmed. And scrutiny members also requested that in future the town account summary in Appendix D is amended to reflect staff costs recharged to town services. Officers have agreed to consider how best to reflect this. There are 11 recommendations to this paper. The first 3 are for Cabinet approval, the others are recommendations to Council. The first 3 being approval of the contribution of 200,000 to the Community Grants Reserve, to reinstate the second to reinstate the contributions to the Asset and Property Reserve and the Parking Access Reserve to support future investment, and the third to approve the increase in fees and charges for the Winchester Sport and Leisure Centre and the Meadowside Centre set out in Appendix F. So I won't read the remaining recommendations, but they are recommendations for approval at Council. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Councillor Cutler. Councillor Godfrey, you wish to address us on this matter?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I shall be as brief as I always am. When I addressed the Cabinet on the medium-term financial strategy back last October, I acknowledged that there were many areas of uncertainty that impacted on the budget for future years. These uncertainties remain, particularly the replacement of the government's new homes bonus scheme, decisions about the retention of locally collected business rates, and the future of the county deal. Councillor Cutler mentioned 2 significant effects that have occurred since October that greatly benefit the council's finances. The government having extended the current new homes bonus scheme, resulting in an additional grant from government of £1.3 million, and forecast an unexpected surplus on the current year's budget of a similar amount. Given the uncertainty that Councillor Cutler reiterated today on Council's future budget, it is right to secure the windfall budget surplus in the reserves for use on a rainy day in the future. What I cannot understand, and I can't agree with, is the proposal to use, rather than save, the government's grant of £1.3 million extra in the new home bonus. This money is clearly burning a hole in the pocket of the administration, so rather than looking after the government funding carefully, the administration proposed to spray this huge amount of money around with a series of unplanned expenditure that I hesitate to call projects. While some of the proposed expenditure of this money is to be very well supported, such as the reinstatement of a hardship fund, which is very important, and I hardly agree with. A substantial amount of money to be spent on maintenance of our monuments and historic assets. That is in itself also welcome. This should be funded from the Asset Reserve, which was set up by the late Freddie Allgood 14 years ago for just this purpose, to ensure that scheduled maintenance of our property could be funded when it needed to be done, not just when there are a few bob spare. And that these 2 trials, both in pursuit of worthwhile outcomes, but with no plans and little prospect of delivering any improvement anytime soon. And why should we run a trial for collecting food waste when it is likely that the government will specify how the schemes must work and will likely provide funding to do it? So that's going to be £150,000 frittered away that we could use much more effectively. Similarly, using £250,000 to fund a trial of zero carbon buses and freight vehicles. What is this trial meant to prove? Zero carbon buses already work effectively in many places. We just need to wait until our current bus contract allows for such a change. when we may need to spare cash which we propose to spend this year to pay for that change. We also know that zero carbon waste raters work fine in urban areas, but do not yet work effectively in rural areas. When challenged the scrutiny committee on this point, we heard that this was not to be a trial of vehicles, but a contribution towards the infrastructure needed to charge these new vehicles. But that infrastructure is wholly the responsibility of the electricity company. Neither of these trials will address the climate emergency, nor the other immediate needs of this district. I ask you to be more careful with taxpayers' money. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments, Councillor Godfrey. I think a number of us have a number of issues with what you said actually then. I don't know whether Councillor Cutler wants to come back on any of those points.
Thank you, Leader. I'll sum up collectively when we've had comments from others.
Councillor Learning.
Thank you. I welcome very much, in particular as the Cabinet Member for Asset Management, the one-off funding for work to monuments and historic assets, as well as the reinstatement of the annual contribution to the Asset and Property Reserve. We have been struggling to fund a large backlog in work to our property, which we were left with when we took over, and the property reserve has never been enough to complete all the work that we need to do. And I think it's important that we recognise that. A good example is that in this city we have a property which is owned by a neighbouring district authority, which is currently sitting empty, partly because they don't have the funds to bring it up to the standard it needs to be to re-let it. So they have a property which is sitting on their books, earning nothing and costing them money, and we can't afford to be left in that situation. So it's really important that we have adequate funding for these projects. The historic monuments, restoration, any work on them is incredibly expensive. We also need to get in specialist surveyors, specialist contractors. We need to get permission from Historic England for anything we want to do, and it is very expensive for what can often look to the general public like not very much work being done, but of course it is essential for the long-term maintenance and to make sure that we don't get even bigger bills down the line. So those aspects in particular I welcome. I do think there is a failure to acknowledge the need to try things out locally rather than launch in on a big scale. I'm very supportive of the pilot schemes and the projects. As somebody who's needed to install an electrical car charging point at home, you know, it's not as simple as just buying an electric vehicle. There are far more considerations to think of and far bigger costs. It is certainly the case that the electrical companies will not be bearing those kind of costs, and if we want to see zero carbon vehicles operating in Winchester sooner rather than later, then I think we really do need to start making a contribution and bringing that forward rather than pushing it back into the long grass. Obviously, as Cabinet, we've had long discussions about the budget, so I won't go into too much more detail, but I think this is a well-constructed budget which uses the additional unexpected funding we have well, without making too many commitments into the future when we know that we will have far less money to spend. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Learning. I'm in questions at the moment. No, that's fine. No? Okay. I would also just like to respond to, about the trials that and the pilot schemes that we are putting forward in this budget. I think it's absolutely critical for our carbon reduction programme, that we do actually look into the infrastructure that we have. We already know that there's a big problem down at the depot that we have in terms of having enough electricity supply to charge a freighter, for instance, and we need to just understand when we're able to have electric freighters, where we are going to charge them and how we're going to do that. And I think actually it's really important that we do get the detail around that. On food waste, absolutely delighted that, again, we would like to set up a pilot scheme for that. We all know that the government is going to mandate us to bring in food waste. Councillor Godfrey, you have far more if you believe the government that they're going to fund all this, then I think you are living in on another planet. I remember during the pandemic, we were told spend what you like, spend whatever you need and you will be refunded. And actually, no, that wasn't the case. Yes, we had some money, but only about 70% of that money was ever repaid. So we had to pick up the tab for the other 30%. So your reliance on government to come up with any funding for any of this, I think, is pie in the sky. Anyway, any further questions from Cabinet? No, I think we've all really been through this paper a lot. Councillor Kerr.
We're having debate.
Debate.
Thank you, Chair. Appreciated. Obviously, first of all, I'm very pleased with the 200,000 to the community grants, because that comes under my portfolio to help reduce the immediate impact of planned grant reductions. I think, may I say, this is a positive budget. It covers essential services. It supports the work to address the climate emergency and to help and improve the environment, not only in Winchester, but in the market towns and around the district. So, Councillor Cutler, I congratulate you and the team. Well done. I think it's an excellent budget in our very difficult times at the moment.
Councillor Williams.
Yes, I would also say that the extra 200,000 for community grants at this time is really welcome. We've got a cost of living rise and residents are struggling. Being able to have these community groups provide those vital services is something I am glad that we are able to do due to our careful budgeting in a time when we have turned around our finances that we had inherited from the previous administration and during the storm of COVID. I can speak for myself, and I'm sure for other members of the Cabinet, when I can say that having to reduce funding is not something we ever wanted to do, but being fiscally responsible is key to good governance. Now, due to prudent planning, we are able to provide more to community grants, and that is a positive and exciting opportunity. I think this budget is forward-thinking. It allows us to meet the key criteria of our council plan and sets out the future for the district. I think the increased provision of 100,000 for the council's hardship fund is vital, given this terrible cost of living crisis our residents are facing. Also, the implementation of the food trial shows our continued commitment to recycling in the district, which is something that potentially was lacking and had been falling when we had taken power. And I do believe that actually trials are important. You can't just jump into massive changes like this without actually making sure you get it right. It's much easier to get something right on a small scale than to get it wrong on a big scale. Also, the 250,000 for low carbon transport trial again shows that we are tackling one of the key contributors to carbon that is under our control. Since we have taken power, we have cut carbon emissions and we are continuing to do so. This money and this project will help us to meet our ambitious target of net zero by 2024. And also, I'm so pleased that we are not just focusing on the city, that we're making sure all areas of our district are taken care of. The 185,000 to clean and maintain our market towns is funding that will allow vital economies to flourish and support our goals of 20-minute communities. They are the lifeblood of their communities, and they showed in COVID how vital they are. And I am glad that we are putting our money where our mouths are and focusing on things that matter to our market towns. I was also very proud that at the last council meeting, the council came together in a sort of a moment of unity and supported the City of Sanctuary motion, and now that we are working to make this a reality. I could literally talk about every point in this budget because I am proud of it, as it stands for our values as a council, but it also shows what a fiscal, responsible authority can do in a time of great uncertainty, and how good leadership results in good things for our residents.
Thank you very much, Councillor Williams. I think a view echoed with all of us sitting around this table. Any further comments? I don't know whether Councillor Gordon-Smith.
Yes, well, speaking, wearing my hat as a New Alsford Town Councillor, I'm very pleased about the relatively small amounts of money which are available for the market towns. They're just looking distinctly shabby, and you know, a small amount of money invested in tidying them up, I think pays a huge dividend in making them attractive and pulling in visitors. In terms of pilot studies, there's an old saying, isn't there? Time spent in reconnaissance is rarely wasted. It's a case in point. You know, make sure you've got it right. And, I mean, there may be, one would hope there'll be a lot of lessons learned about, you know, what can go wrong, and that can be addressed. And when it's done on a bigger scale, you don't end up with a mammoth white elephant. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Cutler, any further comments before we go to the recommendations?
I don't think there's much that I can add to the comments my colleagues have made. Councillor Godfrey clearly, as often is the case, comes back that any investment in the climate emergency he's sceptical of, and one would get the impression that he really isn't entirely on board with the belief that it's important to address it. And I think the points about food waste, both food waste and the infrastructure for electric vehicles have been well made already, so I don't need to add to that. And Councillor Ernie's point about the asset fund are also well made. I think several times I've heard comments of we're not looking after our assets well enough. Well, you know, the last couple of years it have been quite difficult to get on with that work, and we have had to reduce the contribution to the strategy, to the reserve. We are now in a position to do that work and the monuments work, which is very important. So yes, thank you, Leader, and thank you, Cabinet, for your support on this.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cutler. So we now move to the recommendations on page 31 and 32. Cabinet, are we agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you very much. We now move to item number 10, the Capital Investment Strategy, CAB 3332. Councillor Cutler.
Thank you, Leader. The Capital Investment Strategy, the report sets out Council's capital spending programmes and the principles which underpin it in order to deliver the outcomes as set out in the Council plan. It details the overall programme for the next 10 years, how it's financed, the governance around it, the appetite for risk, and the impact on the medium-term financial strategy. The capital programme totals 417.3 million over the next 10 years, of which 60.7 million is general fund and 356.6 for the housing revenue account. Appendix A provides the capital programme by project divided into approved for spend and subject to appraisal. Key changes to this programme are also summarised in the report. The strategy sets out the approval process, the project and programme management protocols are at section 11.6. It also includes the several prudential indicators as required by the SIPFA Prudential Code of Capital Finance, and the real mouthful, the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities Statutory Investment Guidance. It's included in the body of the report and in Appendix A. The report was considered by Scrutiny Committee at its meeting on the 15th of February. A number of questions were responded to, but the committee did not ask for any specific issues to be considered by Cabinet, but did ask officers for feedback to Scrutiny members on a matter in relation to the demolition and interim open space proposals for Friarsgate Medical Centre. That concludes my introduction to the report.
Thank you very much. We've got two speakers who'd like to address us on this item. The first up is Councillor Godfrey, or, well, whoever wishes to go first. Councillor Horror.
Chair, thank you for allowing me to speak again this morning. We had a very good opportunity to ask questions about this paper and discuss the budget in detail on Tuesday at scrutiny. And Chair, I would encourage the Cabinet to consider this approach for more of its decisions. Lacklustre and lacking ambition is how I would describe this programme. Outside of our house building programme, disabled facilities work and the IT enhancements. We are a wealthy council compared with others. We have many assets. And in a time when budgets are stretched, maximising the return from the assets we own is a duty we should embrace. We have a duty to be self-sufficient and deliver the required services. I heard on Tuesday the Liberals tell us that we should not have too many plates spinning. However, we do know that in this area you need to have more options being discussed to ensure at least some of them come to fruition. I hear the capital programme needs to be realistic in terms of delivery on time and within budget. So the approach seems to be not to put too many things on the list in case they fail. We have almost forgotten about the assets we own and their potential. You just commented negatively about other authorities having buildings stood empty when we're doing exactly the same. We have not utilised the work already completed by the Council for projects which could provide positive opportunities if you reviewed them again. Many projects on the list are those that we started more than 3 years ago. And I suppose I'm looking, where are the substantive new options? Why are we not using the Strategic Asset Purchase Scheme to support regeneration in the district, which is absolutely allowed within the financial rules? We certainly have plenty of regeneration opportunities. Chair, I know you'll refute these points, but there is another way to manage the investment strategy. There is a way to understand residents' desires and meet those aspirations within our very own resources. And I hope that that can be considered in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Godfrey.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Councillor Carter need not be worried about my commitment to dealing with the climate emergency. As I drove here through the city on electric power this morning, I will feel smug I shan't be driving back to far-flung parts of the district in a diesel truck, and I certainly won't be sitting in a vehicle in a snug little room like this with 4 great heaters pumping out electrical energy like there's no tomorrow. And I'll get back to my house in South Launceston and look to see what more we can do on a greening campaign out there. So yeah, be assured that up here in the north we're doing okay. On the asset paper, some of the points which Councillor Hurrell raised are the main concerns that perhaps not very much is going on. I'm worried about this. I'm hopeful that the asset management strategy paper, which we've been waiting for a while, far too long in our own time as well as in the current administration's time, will tell us far more about what we should be doing to, as the paper says, provide an increasing level of income for the council from our investment property. And I think this is something which I can acknowledge quite freely, that during my time in charge of finances at the council, we did not monitor the asset register or the asset management plans as openly as we needed to. And I would urge you, when the asset management strategy is published, to use that as your stick to encourage the officers to create a delivery of this important aim of delivering increasing levels of income for a council. I look forward to seeing the strategy. I'm assuming next month at the Audit and Governance Committee, where it's due for review, and very soon after that I would hope that the revisions to the capital programme will reflect the objectives and the plan set out in that, of how our long-term financial future in the City Council can be safeguarded. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for both of those contributions. Cabinet, have we any questions? Councillor Lenny.
Thank you. We've been told we're a wealthy council. Now that may be true in terms of many others, but can I just be reminded of our net financial position with regards to borrowing?
I've got the figure exactly to hand, but we do have borrowing in excess of 180 million. Assets are.
Thank you.
Any further questions? No? Any debate? Councillor Lenny.
Thank you. I'm rather surprised that we're still being encouraged to borrow to invest in property when this is a strategy that has failed so many other councils, particularly at a time when the costs of regeneration are rising quite rapidly. Despite that, we still continue to look at all opportunities that arise in the district. Very few of them actually fall under the definition of regeneration, so we can't borrow to invest even if we wanted to, and even if we can, then when we look at the finances involved, then it's very much impractical. And while we might want to regenerate particular areas, and that's a laudable goal, that is not going to generate vast amounts of profit for the council. I'm pleased to say the asset management strategy is sitting on my desk and currently being reviewed at the moment by myself and the director involved. So that is work that's well on in progress. I'd also like to point out that in terms of development, just this year we've finished the Goodshed development out of Bishop's Waltham. Sorry, not the Goodshed, the Bishop's Waltham depot development out of Bishop's Waltham, which had got totally stalled under the previous administration, but was one where, because we were keen to promote new work environments out in the market towns, where we took the risk and moved ahead with that. So we are taking an approach with our capital strategy where we're pushing to develop where we can, where it's practical, but most of all where it's affordable. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further debate? No, I think Councillor Cutler, you want to say anything?
Well, I just comment. I mean, it has been familiar for the last couple of years, the refrain from the opposition in terms of the capital strategy. We're not into fantasy capital strategies. I know that's one of the approaches, particularly of the national leadership of the Conservative Party at the moment, is to promote big shiny things. I think there's a lack of recognition that in the current circumstances, it's actually very difficult to bring, or in the last 2 years, it's been very difficult to bring anything forward, given the pandemic, and we continue to look for opportunities, but we're going to produce a realistic capital strategy. The other recognition is there seems to be a complete lack of recognition of the amount of capacity required and the revenue costs of working up schemes, again in difficult times when the council has been very stretched and officers have been very stretched. And I actually find it quite surprising that you use the term, the stick, to encourage officers. We don't work that way, and we don't intend to work that way. So I just wanted to make those few comments, Leader, but commend the report to Cabinet.
Thank you very much. Cabinet, turning to the recommendations, they are on pages 65 and 66 of the agenda pack. Are we agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you very much. Right, the next item on our agenda is the Treasury Management Strategy. Again, I ask Councillor Cutler to introduce the paper, and I have no speakers to this book.
Leader, Cabinet, Treasury Management Strategy is a requirement of the SIPFA Treasury Management Code that all councils have an approved Treasury Management Strategy. The strategy set out in this report has been produced with input from Hampshire County Council Investments and Borrowing Team, who manage our cash balances and our investment of surplus cash and sourcing of short-term borrowing. And we're also have input from Arlene Close, the Council's Treasury advisors. The strategy sets out the forecast borrowing need based on the capital investment strategy, general fund and HRA budgets, our borrowing strategy, our investment strategy, and the Treasury management prudential indicators. There are a few changes to the previous strategy. They're mainly around amending investment limits to reflect higher investment balances expected to be held primarily due to a slippage in the capital programme as a consequence of global transportation and supply issues. This will enable the Council to take advantage of higher yielding investments over longer periods. The report was considered by the Scrutiny Committee. A number of questions were responded to, but the committee did not ask for any specific issues to be considered by Cabinet.
Cabinet, have we any questions on this paper? Again, it's been through scrutiny, we've all seen it several times over. No? Any debate? No. Move to the recommendations then on pages 107 and 108. Are we agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much. And the final item on our agenda today is the forward plan for March, which we're just asked to note. Happy to note it?
Noted.
Thank you very much. It's just gone 10:30 and I therefore close the meeting, and thank you all for your attendance. Thank you officers for the reports. I know a lot of effort's gone into the budget is always a bit of a frantic time and there's lots of information to gather together. So thank you so much and see you all again soon.